Ethan Cole was not a soldier or a hero. He was just an engineer who liked quiet nights, hot coffee, and working on machines that didn't talk back. The human outpost on the edge of Andromeda was small, old, and half forgotten by the Central Command. That suited him fine. The fewer people around, the better. He could fix things, listen to the hum of generators, and pretend the rest of the galaxy didn't exist. But that night, everything changed. The power lights flickered once, then twice. The hum of the defense grid wavered. Ethan frowned, wiping grease from his hands as he leaned closer to the screen. "That's not normal," he muttered. The sensors were showing a strange ripple outside the perimeter. Not a ship, not a meteor, just distortion. It looked like space itself had bent for a second and then snapped back. He tapped the control board again. Probably a glitch, he told himself, though his stomach tightened. He'd seen those readings once before, years ago, when a teleport signature had appeared during a war experiment that went wrong. Teleportation was banned for a reason. It could tear open space like paper if mishandled. He shut off the console and headed to his room. The corridors were dim, echoing with the metallic creak of the outpost. Somewhere a vent hissed. The night shift was always lonely, but this silence felt heavier, like someone was listening. Ethan reached his cabin, stepped inside, and locked the reinforced door out of habit. The lock beeped softly, solid titanium. No one could open it from the outside. He exhaled and leaned against the wall. "Just a sensor bug," he said. Nothing more. Then light filled the room. It started as a shimmer in the corner, a thin vertical line of blue light that stretched wider, trembling like water. Ethan froze, his hand halfway to the plasma wrench on the table. The air rippled, bent inward, and then a figure stepped through. A girl. No, not a girl, and something beyond human. Her hair shimmered silver like moonlight, and her eyes glowed faintly with an unnatural hue. She wore a dark cloak torn at the edges, and underneath metallic threads glistened faintly. Not armor, but something more advanced. She stumbled forward, looked around the room quickly. Then her gaze met his. "Don't move," Ethan warned, grabbing the plasma wrench.
"Who are you?"
"How did you get in here?" She tilted her head, breathing hard. "I needed to hide." Her voice was calm, soft, but carried a strange authority. "This room was locked," Ethan said sharply. You teleported, didn't you?" "That's illegal." She raised her hand slightly, palm glowing faintly blue. "Quiet, human." "They're tracking my signature." Ethan blinked. "Who's tracking you?" She walked past him, ignoring his question, and looked out the narrow window that faced the landing bay. Outside, the stars glittered in silence, but she seemed to see more. Her eyes moved with sharp focus, scanning invisible trails. Then she whispered, "They found me." "What?" Ethan asked. She turned to him again, her expression calm but her breathing fast. "You locked the door." "That was wise, but it won't help. They can find me anywhere." Ethan stared, confused and angry. "Look, I don't know who you are, but you need to get out of here. If Command finds an unregistered alien on board, She cut him off with a gesture. "Command won't matter if we're both dead." The words froze him. She wasn't bluffing, and her tone carried certainty. And as if to prove it, the station alarm blared suddenly. Red lights flashing across the ceiling. Unidentified crafts detected. Approaching vector. Unknown origin. Ethan ran to the console near his bed, typing fast. 3 ships were entering orbit. No human signals, no IDs. His hands trembled slightly. "Those your people?" She gave a short, bitter laugh. "No, they want me gone. Or worse." Ethan looked at her again. The strange shimmer in her eyes now looked less like glow and more like exhaustion. She leaned on the table, her breath unsteady. Whatever she had done to teleport here, it had drained her. "Who are you?" he asked again, softer this time. For a moment, she didn't answer. Then she straightened and said, "My name is Lyra of the Zalari Dominion." She paused, watching his reaction. Ethan frowned. He'd heard of the Zalari, a race from deep Andromeda space said to master folded dimensions. They were powerful, secretive, and rarely seen. "The Dominion?" he repeated. "You mean royalty?" Her lips pressed into a thin line. Not anymore. The sound of distant explosions echoed faintly through the hull. The enemy ships had opened fire, not on the outpost, but nearby satellites. Lyra turned toward the door. "They're clearing every trace of my jump. They'll burn this place if they must." Ethan felt the floor tremble as a blast shook the station. The old metal groaned under stress. "You brought a war to my doorstep," he said through clenched teeth. "I didn't choose this," she replied, her tone quiet. "But I won't die here." Another explosion sounded, closer now. Ethan grabbed a small backpack, shoving tools inside. "If we stay, we're done. There's an escape tunnel through the maintenance decks." Lyra looked at him curiously. "You're helping me?" He hesitated. "You showed up in my room, broke through a locked door, and brought half the galaxy down on my head. I don't have much choice, do I?" Something faint, maybe amusement, crossed her face. "Then lead the way, human." They stepped into the corridor. The emergency lights glowed red, shadows stretching across the walls. Ethan kept his plasma wrench ready. The outpost shook again as another blast hit somewhere above. Sparks fell from the ceiling. They moved fast, turning into a side tunnel where the air smelled of metal and ozone. Lyra kept glancing back, as if watching something only she could sense. "They're close," she murmured. Ethan checked his wrist screen. "How do you know?" She tapped her temple lightly. "Quantum sense. They left markers when they tracked my teleport trace. They're following it like bloodhounds." "Great," Ethan muttered. "Anything else I should know?" She didn't answer. The tunnel narrowed, forcing them to crouch. Ethan led her through a hatch that opened into the generator bay. The hum of machines was loud enough to mask their steps. He opened another control panel and rerouted the power, trying to mask heat signatures. Lyra watched him work silently, then asked, "You're skilled." "Engineer?" "Maintenance tech," he corrected. "Someone has to keep this rust pile alive." She smiled faintly, the first sign of warmth he'd seen from her. "A humble job, yet you handle power lines like command codes." Ethan didn't look up. "You talk like someone used to giving orders." "I was," she said simply. "Before I ran." He glanced at her, but her expression had turned distant. She wasn't just running from enemies, she was running from a whole empire. Before he could reply, his wrist screen beeped softly. Motion detected, several life signs approaching. He cursed under his breath. "They're here." Lyra closed her eyes for a second. "They will break through every level until they find us." "Then we don't stay," Ethan said, grabbing her hand before he realized it. "This way," she didn't protest. They ran down another tunnel, metal ringing under their steps. Behind them, the sound of boots echoed faintly. The hunters had arrived. They reached a lower deck, the dark half flooded with condensation from the cooling systems. Ethan pushed open a heavy hatch and locked it behind them. For a few moments, they both stood still, breathing hard. Lyra leaned against the wall, her eyes half closed. "You could have left me," she whispered. "Why didn't you?" Ethan thought about it, then shrugged. "Maybe because you broke into my room and scared the life out of me. I want some answers before you vanish again." A small laugh escaped her. "You locked the door," she said softly. "I didn't mean to scare you." "You teleported inside my locked room," he said. "That's the definition of scary." Her laughter faded, replaced by quiet seriousness. "If we survive tonight, maybe I'll explain." Ethan wanted to argue, but another tremor shook the deck. The ceiling lights flickered again. Somewhere above, the hunters were cutting through. He looked at her, pale, tired yet steady, and realized she wasn't the kind of alien he'd heard about in old military briefings. She was something rare, something powerful, and something dangerous to stand beside. He sighed, tightening his grip on his wrench. "All right, Lyra of the Dominion. Let's see how far we can run before the roof collapses." She smiled faintly. "You locked your door, Ethan Cole, but the universe seems to have opened another one for you." He didn't know what she meant, but as alarms wailed and the outpost shook, he had a feeling that from this night on, his quiet life at the edge of the galaxy was over. Ethan and Lyra moved carefully through the maintenance tunnels beneath the outpost. The narrow metal corridors smelled of oil, ozone, and the faint tang of old machinery. Every step echoed like a drumbeat in the silence, and Ethan kept glancing back, expecting to see hunters at any corner. But for now, they were alone, or at least alone enough. Lyra's breathing was steady now, though her silver eyes still flickered with strain. "You need to understand," she began quietly. "They are not normal soldiers. They are trained to track quantum signatures. My jump left marks, small but detectable. They follow these marks like hunters follow prey." Ethan frowned. "Quantum trackers, great. So they can find you anywhere?" She nodded. "Almost anywhere. That's why we have to move fast. The longer we stay on the same grid, the easier it is for them. He considered this, then asked, "Why you? Why are they after you?" Her gaze dropped to the floor. "I am the heir of the Zolari Dominion. My father, or what is left of his council, tried to betray me. They want me gone or dead. I escaped, but they caught my trail." Ethan's heart beat faster. He had heard of the Zolari Dominion in passing. Stories of advanced technology, immense power, and ruthless politics. But he had never imagined meeting someone from their royal lineage in person, let alone in his small, forgotten outpost. "You're royalty?" "Yes," she said simply, "and a target." The tunnel shook as another distant explosion hit the outpost. Dust fell from the ceiling, and a low hum of danger filled the air. Ethan tightened his grip on his plasma wrench. "We need a plan. Hiding here isn't enough. Those ships will find a way in." Lyra looked up at him, her face calm despite the stress. "There is a way. Below this level, there are old service tunnels. They are mostly unused, unmonitored. If we can reach the sub-level, we can move without detection." Ethan glanced at the narrow hatch ahead. "Sub-level? You mean the tunnels that are mostly flooded and falling apart?" "Yes," she said. "They are our best chance." They climbed through the hatch, descending into the lower corridors. The air was damp, thick with mist, and the metal floor was slippery. Ethan's boots clanged against the rails, each sound making his stomach tighten. He glanced at Lyra, who seemed completely at ease. She moved like someone who had spent years navigating dangerous places, stepping lightly even in the wet, unstable corridors. "You've been through a lot," Ethan said, breaking the silence. "You don't look like someone running scared." She smiled faintly. "I cannot afford fear, not now. Fear makes mistakes." They moved deeper, the sounds of the station above becoming faint echoes. Ethan asked, "How long can you keep using teleportation? Doesn't it hurt you?" She paused for a moment, thinking. "Each jump drains energy. It takes a lot to move through space like I did to get here. If I overextend, I could collapse." Ethan frowned. "So if we get caught, you might not survive." Her expression was calm. "I have survived worse." As they walked, a faint vibration ran through the floor, not the outpost shaking, but something else. Ethan's senses sharpened. "Wait, do you feel that?" Lyra nodded. "They are close. Sensors don't see them yet, but I can feel their proximity. They are hunting." Ethan's heart pounded. He tightened his grip on the wrench. "How many?" "3 at least," she said, her eyes scanning the shadows. "Elite hunters. They know every trick. And they will not stop until they have you as leverage." "Or me dead?" Ethan swallowed. "You brought me into this. I don't even know what I'm supposed to do." Lyra stopped and turned to him. "You will do what humans do best, adapt, survive, help me reach the relay core." "The relay core?" he asked, confused. "It's a device that can fold space," she explained. "If we reach it, I can create a jump large enough to escape them. But I cannot do it alone. I need someone to help reroute power and stabilize the field." "That's you, human." Ethan's mind raced. "Me? You want me to help you fold space? That's impossible. I fix engines and circuits, not quantum jump cores." "You fix engines and circuits," she said simply. "That is enough. I need a human touch to make sure the energy doesn't collapse." "Can you do that?" He hesitated, but seeing the calm determination in her eyes, he nodded. "All right. Let's get to your relay core. But if we die, I'm blaming you for dragging me into this." She chuckled faintly, a rare sound that lightened the tension. "Fair enough." They moved faster, the tunnels narrowing further. Water dripped from the ceiling, and Ethan slipped once, catching himself on the railing. Lyra was already ahead, moving smoothly over puddles, seemingly untouched by the damp and cold. Ethan followed, careful not to fall behind. After what felt like hours, they reached a junction. Old warning signs hung crookedly from the walls, written in a language Ethan didn't understand. "This way," Lyra said, pointing to a narrow passage partially hidden behind a stack of abandoned crates. "The core is not far, but we are exposed here. Sensors cannot see us well, but movement will alert them." Ethan nodded. "Lead the way." They moved silently, each step echoing faintly. The faint hum of distant engines above reminded Ethan that the hunters were never far away. Suddenly, a small light blinked ahead, a drone. Its sensors glowed red. Ethan froze. "Do you see that?" Lyra didn't answer immediately. She raised her hand slightly, and the air around the drone warped. In an instant, the drone imploded silently, leaving a faint smell of ozone. Ethan stared, mouth open. "Careful," she said. "If I use too much energy, I could collapse." "Collapsing isn't really something I wanted to deal with right now," he muttered. "But thanks." They continued and soon reached a large chamber beneath the outpost. Dust and debris floated in the dim light. At the center was a console with old wires and panels, some sparking occasionally. Ethan recognized it immediately, an old relay core for interstellar jumps. It was exactly what Lyra had described. "This is it?" he asked. "Yes," she said, stepping closer. "If we can get this online, I can create a jump to a safe location. But we have to move quickly. They will find this chamber soon." Ethan nodded. He knelt beside the console, opening panels and checking the circuits. "The core's old, but the wiring is intact. If we reroute power from the secondary grid, it might just work." Lyra watched him closely. "Be careful. Even a small miscalculation could tear the tunnel apart." Ethan worked fast, rerouting the power and stabilizing the circuits as best he could. Sweat ran down his face. He had never worked under this kind of pressure, but fear sharpened his focus. Each wire he connected, each circuit he adjusted was a step closer to survival. Suddenly, a vibration ran through the floor. Ethan looked up. "They're here," Lyra tensed. "We must hurry. Power the relay core fully. I'll handle the jump sequence." Ethan's fingers flew over the console, connecting wires and activating power channels. Sparks flew, and the hum of energy filled the chamber. Lyra placed her hands on the relay, her body glowing faintly as she prepared to fold space. Above them, metal groaned. Footsteps echoed. Hunters were entering the chamber. Ethan's heart raced. "Almost there," he muttered, connecting the last circuit. Lyra took a deep breath. "Ready," she said. Energy crackled around her, bright and blinding. "Now!" The relay core activated, a wave of light filling the chamber. Ethan felt the floor tilt beneath him as space itself warped around them. The hunters reached the doorway, but the jump tore a hole in reality. They were flung into a distant void, caught between here and nowhere. When the light faded, Ethan and Lyra were standing in silence. The chamber was intact, but the danger had vanished. Ethan leaned against the console, breathing heavily. "That worked?" Lyra nodded, though she looked exhausted. "Yes, for now." Ethan studied her, still amazed. "You just teleported through an entire attack, and I helped." "We survived," she smiled faintly. "Humans have a way of surprising even the most advanced species. You adapted, you survived, and you helped me do what seemed impossible." Ethan shook his head. "I just did what I had to do, but don't expect me to get used to this kind of night." Lyra laughed softly, the first sound that felt warm in the cold, metallic tunnels. "No human would. But tonight you were more than a mechanic. You were a companion in survival." They looked around, the silence of the chamber settling. For the first time, Ethan realized that his quiet life had ended. From now on, he was part of something bigger, a galaxy full of power, danger, and the impossible, and beside him, Lyra, the alien princess, finally allowed herself to relax, knowing that for now they were safe. The silence in the sub-level chamber didn't last long. Ethan and Lyra barely had time to catch their breath before the warning lights flickered again. Outside the reinforced walls, the outpost's hull trembled as distant explosions shook the station. Ethan's heart raced. They had survived the initial hunt, but the threat was far from over. The Zalari hunters were relentless. They would not give up until Lyra was captured or dead. "We cannot stay here," Lyra said, her voice steady but tired. "They will regroup. If we remain, they will come through the tunnels. The next attack could be stronger." Ethan nodded, rubbing the back of his neck. "Where then?" "We can't exactly walk into the open and hope they don't see us." Lyra's silver eyes scanned the chamber. "There is an old emergency hangar beneath this level. Most ships were decommissioned years ago, but one remains functional. If we reach it, I can use the jump core to fold space and escape, but I will need your help to stabilize the energy and control the relay." Ethan exhaled slowly, glancing at the faint glow of the core behind her. "I've never worked with a jump core before. You realize that, right?" "You adapted before," she said. "I trust you can do it again." He hesitated. Then, seeing the determination on her face and the faint exhaustion in her posture, he swallowed and nodded. "All right, let's move." The tunnels leading to the emergency hangar were narrow and dark. Water dripped from the ceiling, pooling on the floor, making their steps slippery. Ethan's boots echoed against the metal as he followed Lyra, whose silver hair caught the faint emergency lights, giving her an almost ethereal glow. You're quiet, she remarked softly. Thinking about running away? He shook his head. No. Thinking about how the universe just dumped you on me and now we're running for our lives. She gave a small, amused smile. And yet you continue. Courage is rare in humans, but not entirely lost, he chuckled. Thanks, I think. As they advanced, the faint vibration of movement in the tunnels made Ethan tense. He could sense the hunters were still tracking them, though their sensors hadn't yet detected the pair in the damp corridors. Lyra's senses, however, were far sharper. She paused and pressed her hand against the wall. They are close, less than 100 meters away. Ethan glanced over his shoulder but saw nothing. How do you know? Quantum trace, she said simply. They follow energy signatures left behind by my jumps. It is subtle, but I can feel it. They moved faster, the urgency of the situation pushing them through the narrow corridors. Ethan's mind raced, calculating every turn and exit, trying to anticipate where they might encounter danger. Lyra moved with grace and precision, almost as if she had run these paths countless times. Finally, they reached the hatch leading to the hangar. Lyra placed her hand on the control panel, scanning for residual security systems. There are still a few automated defenses, she noted. I can disable them temporarily, but it will drain some of my energy. Ethan stepped closer. Do it, we don't have a choice. A soft hum filled the air as Lyra focused. Lights flickered and circuits whispered, then went dark. The path was clear. Ethan helped lift the hatch, and together they descended into the emergency hangar. The hangar was vast but abandoned. Rusted ships lined the walls, most of them inoperable. One vessel, however, stood intact. A small, sleek craft with emergency power. Enough to make a jump if Lyra could stabilize the core. Ethan approached it cautiously. This one will fly? Yes, Lyra said, her voice tight with concentration. Barely, but it will. As Ethan prepared to reroute the power for the relay core, distant metallic clanks echoed through the hangar. The hunters had found them. Ethan's stomach dropped. They're here. Lyra's eyes narrowed. We must act fast. Power the relay core while I focus on the jump sequence. We only have one chance. Ethan knelt beside the console, opening panels and connecting wires as instructed. Sparks flew as he rerouted the emergency power from the hangar's generators to the jump core. Lyra hovered beside him, her hands glowing faintly as she prepared the fold space sequence. The first hunter appeared at the hangar entrance, a tall, armored figure moving silently, yet with deadly precision. Ethan froze, but Lyra raised her hand. A faint shimmer of energy bent the air around them, slowing the hunter's approach. The second and third hunters followed, weapons drawn, but the field around Lyra made their movement awkward and uncoordinated. Keep going, she shouted, her energy visibly draining. Almost there. Ethan's fingers moved rapidly over the console. Wires hummed with power, panels sparked, and the relay core began to glow brighter than the hangar lights. The hunters surged forward, their steps echoing ominously. Ethan fired a small plasma flare to hold them back temporarily, but he knew it would only last seconds. Lyra stepped into the center of the hangar, energy rippling from her hands. Now, she yelled. The relay core activated fully, sending waves of light and energy throughout the chamber. Space itself seemed to bend and ripple, folding around them in impossible angles. The hunters reached the threshold, but the fold space burst caught them, tossing them violently into a void beyond comprehension. The light of the core blinded Ethan, and he could feel the gravitational pull of the fold pressing against his chest. He barely managed to hold on as Lyra collapsed to one knee, exhausted from the massive energy output. The hangar shook violently, but the core held steady. Outside, the remaining enemy ships hovered, but they could not penetrate the space fold. Ethan rushed to Lyra's side. Are you all right? He asked, supporting her. She nodded weakly, her silver hair glowing faintly in the dim light. For now, yes, but I cannot repeat that without rest. Ethan looked at her, realizing the full extent of what had just happened. They had survived impossible odds. He had worked a relay core he barely understood, and she had bent space itself to protect them. Together they had escaped death. The hangar settled into quiet. Ethan straightened, brushing dust from his clothes. I have to admit, he said with a tired smile, I didn't think we'd make it. Lyra returned a faint smile. Humans are full of surprises, Ethan Cole. You adapted under pressure, solved problems quickly, and helped me survive. That is rare even for my people. Ethan shook his head. I just did what I had to do. But don't expect me to get used to this life of running and space bending. Lyra's eyes softened. None do, but you faced it and you succeeded. That is what matters. Ethan glanced around the hangar. The enemy ships were gone, either destroyed in the fold space burst or flung far away. The emergency lights flickered once, then returned to normal. He could feel the adrenaline fading, leaving only exhaustion. Lyra rose slowly, leaning on the console for support. We must leave this place soon. The fold space jump will only carry us a safe distance. After that, we will need a new plan. Ethan nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility. Then let's make that plan together. She looked at him, eyes shimmering faintly with gratitude. Together, she agreed. For the first time since the chaos began, Ethan felt a spark of hope. Against all odds, they had survived. He realized that from this moment on, nothing would be the same. The galaxy was vast, dangerous, and unpredictable, but he was no longer alone. By his side was Lyra, a being of unimaginable power and courage, and together they could face whatever came next. The hangar doors opened slowly as the jump core powered the sleek craft. Ethan helped Lyra aboard, checking the controls and stabilizing the energy feed. The lights of the relay core reflected off the ship's surface, casting a faint glow in the chamber. Ready? Ethan asked, gripping the console. Lyra nodded. Ready. The craft lifted slightly from the hangar floor, energy rippling along its hull. Ethan activated the final sequence and the relay core hummed with immense power. The world around them blurred, the stars stretching into streaks of light. Then, with a sudden rush of motion, the hangar, the tunnels, and the outpost vanished from view. When they stabilized, Ethan looked out the viewport. The stars were still, and the vast emptiness of space surrounded them. The immediate threat was gone. Lyra exhaled, her energy finally beginning to return. Ethan sat back, exhausted but relieved. We made it. Lyra turned to him, a faint smile on her face. Yes, thanks to you, human. You are stronger than I expected. Ethan smiled tiredly. You too. But don't expect me to get used to rescuing alien royalty. She laughed softly, the sound warm and genuine. Then I shall be careful in the future. Or at least try to be. The two sat in the quiet of the ship, the vast galaxy stretching before them. For now they were safe. But both knew the journey ahead would be filled with dangers, enemies, and impossible choices. Yet for the first time they were ready to face them together. And in that moment Ethan realized something remarkable. Life could change in an instant. A locked door, a sudden teleport, and a chance encounter had rewritten his fate. The stars stretched endlessly around them, and for the first time Ethan felt like he truly belonged in the vastness of space, not as a lone engineer, but as a companion to someone extraordinary. Lyra rested her head lightly against his shoulder, and he allowed himself a rare moment of peace. They had survived the impossible, and together, they would face whatever the galaxy dared to throw at them next. The adventure was only beginning.